Welcome everyone to our eTrans Services SmartSimple Cloud webinar series. Our webinar today is titled Stop, Warn, Redirect, Build Smarter Grant Applications with SmartSimple Validations. This webinar is focused on discovering how the right validations streamline workflows, reduce errors, and create a better user journey. So the ideal audience for today's webinar are SmartSimple administrators and staff users. Just a note for today's session, it is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel later on this week. I am Karina Quinn and I'll be the facilitator for our webinar today. So if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to type them in the chat and I will make sure our presenter, Jamie, answers them during our Q&A session. I'll make sure to monitor them throughout so that all of your questions get answered. Now, I'd like to introduce you all to Jamie Neal, our program manager for our digital services team at eTrans Services, who will be presenting today's webinar. So welcome, Jamie, and I'll pass the mic over to you.
All right. Thanks, Karina, and welcome everyone. Just first, a quick note about our digital services team at eTrans Services. So we specialize in the design and implementation of grants management systems and other business automation solutions using SmartSimple Cloud and our white-labeled FedRAMP compliant version called UDPass. So just here's a quick overview of our topics today. I'm going to talk about why validations matter and the different types of validations that are available in SmartSimple. I'll do a short demo and then we'll talk about some best practices and then we will wrap up with a short Q&A session. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and then Karina will kind of curate those for the end. So why do validations matter? Validations are critical to the grant application lifecycle, especially when you have applicants who are not familiar with your process or requirements. You want to make sure that everything's complete and accurate from the start. Grant-making organizations expect applications to meet certain review and funding standards. So by ensuring the data is entered correctly at submission, you minimize rework for the team later. That means you usually don't have to send applications back for revisions or decline them outright because there's something missing. And it just results in a more efficient and streamlined review process and decision-making process. Validations usually make for a better user experience for applicants as well. They provide the real-time feedback, letting applicants know that there are issues with their data before submission and preventing incomplete applications from going through. Validations also help applicants stay on top of key submission requirements like deadlines, and they offer guidance on progress and application completeness. And then validations can also be leveraged for staff during application, like the review and award stages, making sure that the decision information and all the award terms are complete before a grant gets activated. Validations can do usually two things for you. They can stop you from moving forward, or they can warn you of potential issues. Preventative validations do exactly what the name suggests. They stop an application from moving forward until certain conditions are met. You can use them at any point in the application lifecycle, whether you're checking if an applicant is eligible or making sure that all the required information is filled out correctly, or confirming that funding and award details are complete before making an award decision. These validations are going to ensure that nothing slips through the cracks. The key thing to remember is that with a preventative validation, the user has to fix the error before continuing. And then guidance-based validations are more about giving users helpful information and warnings. So, for example, you can remind applicants of upcoming deadlines and let them know they already have an application in progress if they try to start a new one, or alert them that their organization or user profile are incomplete. You can even use a guidance-based validation alongside a preventative validation. So it's like a heads up, you might have a problem strategy. With a guidance-based validation, it's up to the application's rules whether that correction is going to be required, but on their own, they don't stop you from moving forward in the application process. Some types of preventative validations give applicants instant feedback. So if something isn't quite right, and then you won't even have to click submit for it to kick in. So a common example is using a character or word count limit. So if a user exceeds the maximum length for a text field, for example, they're immediately alerted. And while this application will block while this validation is going to block the application from being submitted, like all preventative validations, it also provides that real-time guidance and lets the user know that they have to fix something right away in their text before they even try to submit. Another type is a file type restriction on an upload field. So if an upload field is set to accept only certain types of files, any attempt to upload a different file type will trigger an immediate error and prevent the upload altogether. For advanced data tables, validations can occur in two ways. They can either occur when the application is submitted or inside the table itself. When table validations are used, individual cells can check different criteria. So they might include character limits within a cell, comparisons to other data or other cells within the same table, checks against custom fields elsewhere in the application, or even specific formatting rules within that cell. And when the user clicks save, the table will automatically check for errors and display a message if any of the data doesn't meet the required conditions. Submission errors are one of the most effective and common forms of validation. These occur when an application moves from one status to another, or when the save and validate button is used. If any validation errors are triggered, the application won't advance. An error summary appears at the top of the record with clickable links that take the users directly to the error for correction. The user will usually see a red box too around the problematic field, and then there's red error text that occurs beneath the issue and clearly describes what the problem is. Mandatory field validations are enabled with a toggle switch in the field's configuration. When turned on, the system checks that the field contains data at the time of submission. An asterisk in the field caption indicates that it's required. These fields are always validated if they're visible on the form. So regardless of the user's role or the application status, if it's mandatory, it's going to trigger that alert. There's also an option for fields to appear as mandatory. So they look like they're mandatory, but they may have some other validation behind them that has certain conditions that have to be met. Field level validations typically focus on data formatting. These are configured directly on the field. Common examples include checking for a valid email address format or phone number format. These validations can also compare data values or verify a condition like whether the date is in the past. And then smart checks are kind of the powerhouse of SmartSimple. They are the most flexible validation tool. They can handle a wide range of checks, including things like missing contacts or activities, formatting errors, incomplete answers or incorrect answers, conditional mandatory logic, and then other complex data rules. So SmartCheck allows for more comprehensive control over how and when data is validated, and it's more ideal for advanced situations. Here's a couple of common examples of SmartCheck validations. So minimum and maximum number values, like a customized request amount threshold. Checkbox values, so maybe checking the number of values selected in a list or preventing a user from checking a box and then also checking none of the above at the same time. Dates and date relationships, such as checking if a deadline has passed or whether the end date is before the start date. Checking for missing activities. So many applications require the addition of objectives, milestones, metrics, or other types of activities. And the Smart Check can detect whether any have been added. Incomplete activities such as overdue reports or amendments in progress may prevent an applicant from submitting a new application. Missing contacts such as a signatory or a fiscal sponsor. Eligibility requirements like a failed eligibility quiz, having a current active grant, or a previously declined application. That may be a condition that you would want to prevent submission of a new one. Advanced data tables. So checking to see if the request amount matches the total budget or if the minimum number of rows has been added to a table, for example. So chances are if something needs validating, there's a Smart Check that can do it. Guidance-based validations aren't strictly validations in the traditional sense. They won't block an application from being completed or submitted. Instead, they'll provide real-time feedback, warning users about potential issues and offering corrective guidance as needed. These validations help maintain data integrity throughout the application process and also without interrupting the user's workflow. Display messages are a great way to alert applicants when something might be off. Using advanced logic, display message fields can identify data issues similar to a Smart Check validation and then notify the applicant that a problem might exist. So these messages are especially helpful when used alongside those preventative validations, offering a heads up before a user is stopped from progressing, and then keeping them aware of potential problems early on. Beyond the warnings, success messages are also useful. So for instance, after correcting a data issue, showing a success message reassures the user that the problem has been resolved. These are usually in green, so you see the little check mark and you know that you've completed something, and the system will let you know that you've done it correctly. These positive reinforcements enhance that user experience and build confidence in the application process. And there are other types of helpful guidance-based messages, such as a confirmation message. This lets the applicant confirm that they're about to submit. So when they hit that submit button, this will pop up and they'll have to say yes if they're ready to continue. Countdown timers. These can display the time left until an application deadline. So this alerts users that the submission issues might arise if the deadline has passed. So it's like a constant reminder that this is how long you have before you have to submit your application. And then completion indicators. This is showing the applicant how much of their application has been completed. So again, while guidance validations alone don't stop a submission, they can become more powerful when they're combined with those preventative validations. And then they just offer that helpful insight as you move through the process. Okay, so now I'm going to do a demo, and I'll walk you through some of the validations that we have talked about. So let me stop sharing the presentation here. Okay. I'm going to log in as an applicant. Hopefully you all can still see my screen. So I'm going to show you what the application process looks like with several of the validations that we just talked about. Let me go ahead and get to a new application. So you'll notice that I have this countdown timer that's telling me how much time I have before the application deadline. So this is going to help applicants stay on track and encourage timely submissions. You'll also see this is one of those guidance-based warnings we were talking about that tells me that I already have an application in progress. It's not going to stop me from continuing, but it does help avoid confusion. So if I already started an application a couple of times, it tells me how to get back to find the existing one if I want to just abandon this one. And then there's an eligibility quiz that I have to complete before I move forward. So first I'm going to answer it incorrectly. I'll show you what happens there. Okay, so since I'm not eligible, I get this error message. This is, again, one of those guidance-based validations that shows up. My only option now is to exit the application because I am not eligible. So now I'm going to show you what happens if I pass the quiz. Once again, I'm going to go back to my application and I will say yes. And again, I get this guidance-based validation message that tells me that I have successfully completed this step and a different button that's going to take me right to the application. So in the main application, you'll notice that the countdown timer is still showing. There's still that guidance validation that tells me I already have one in progress. I'm going to ignore it. And then there's a new guidance validation that tells me that my user profile is incomplete. And this is letting me know that I probably will have an issue if I try to submit and my profile is incomplete. If I wanted to, I could click this icon here and I could go directly to my profile and update it, and then that would clear this message out. You'll also see this completion indicator that shows me how much of my application I've completed so far, which is almost nothing. And then let me show you some validations that are triggered on submission. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a project start date that's in the past, which is kind of an illogical situation. And then I'm going to also enter an end date that is before my start date, which is something that would never happen. And then also I'll show you, I have a threshold on my request amount. So I'm going to put something over the threshold here. And then I'm going to try to submit. Now, this is obviously going to trigger a bunch of errors because I've hardly done any of my application. So I'm getting a bunch of errors about mandatory fields and different things that are missing. But you can see that I have this error here that says the start date can't be before today. So if I click on that error, I can go right to the field and I can actually fix this. So I'll put the start date in the future. And then again, I can look at my end date must be after the start date. So again, if I click on it, I can go right to the error and I'll just put my end date out further into the future. And that also clears that error right away. The other thing you'll notice here is that my request amount, my maximum is $50,000 and I've asked for 60. So I'm going to fix that. And that clears that message as well. Okay, so let's do, let me try to submit again. And I've cleared out some of my errors, but there's some more. So I can see that some of my mandatory fields, these are just toggled on in the field settings, are not completed, so they can't be empty. This one, the project summary, also has a minimum word count. It has to be at least 100 words long. So if I put, 100 words or more in there, that error will clear out as well. Let me show you a table validation. So this is a smart check that's enabled on this partner table that says I must have at least one collaborative partner in my table. So I need to put a row in here with somebody's name. Fill out my table, save that. And then if I try to submit again, that error is cleared. And then I'll show you on the budget table, I have a validation built into the table itself. So if I go here, there's a validation that says that my total budget has to equal the amount that I've requested. So I'm just going to add a line here. And I'm going to put it for more than my amount requested and try to save. And you'll notice if I have violated the validation that's in my table, it won't even save the table. It's not going to let me do anything until I fix it. This is obviously a very expensive trip to Hawaii, so I'm going to cut that down a little bit. And now that it matches my amount requested, I'm good to go. I can save my table and I can move on. And then the last thing I'll show you is an upload field. So you'll notice on this upload field that the only file type that I have allowed is an Excel file. I'm going to try to upload a file of a different type, and I just have a PDF here that I'm going to drop into my upload field. And right away, you can see it's going to tell me I can't do it. It doesn't even let the file upload. It just stops you right there. Okay, so some considerations and best practices. One of them is mandatory fields. So one of the easiest ways to improve your data quality is by setting up those mandatory fields for key information. They're easy to configure and they come with simple validation messages that you can also customize them if you want, but usually the message is basically that the field can't be blank. And that just prompts users to complete those required fields. It's a quick and easy win that ensures that you're always capturing that essential data. Appear is mandatory. We talked about that a little bit. That helps users know that there's a potential issue. So you can set the field to look like it's mandatory, and there can be a validation that's enabled on it, and then you can use that in conjunction with that appear as mandatory. It's just a simple toggle switch in the field configuration, and it helps to highlight important fields that have submit validations, and it prevents users from unintentionally skipping over them. Still gives you that flexibility in the rules, but it allows you to let users know that there's something about it that's going to be required. Warn and inform, so combine messages and validations together. We did talk about that as well. It is a good practice to combine guidance-based messages with those preventative validations. This way you can keep the users informed of potential issues early on, and then you give them a chance to correct those issues before they actually try to submit. Let's see, using simple error navigation to make fixing issues easy. So we saw those clickable error messages in the demo, and use those also in Smart Check validations as well. And that will still give you that clickable link to take you right to the problem field. And that makes correction easier and more intuitive. So easy navigation reduces frustration and speeds up the submission process. And lastly, just keep things clear, simple, and user-friendly. Use plain language and simple instructions that are easy to understand, even for users who may not be familiar with technical terms. So clear messaging leads to a better overall user experience and then fewer support requests, which we all love. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Karina for Q&A.
Awesome. Great presentation. Thank you, Jamie. I am monitoring the chat for any questions that come in, but before we get started with our Q&A session, and as we wait for these questions, I wanted to let you all know that this QR code that you're seeing on the screen will give you access to our YouTube channel, where the recording will be posted by the end of this week. And also it links to other links to our social media sites, so you can follow us for more upcoming webinars or events. So now during this Q&A session, we're happy to answer any questions you all left in the chat. So please feel free to either unmute your mic or ask away or continue dropping your questions into the chat. All right, so I do have a question that states, we have experienced issues with applicants uploading incorrect pieces of required documentation within the application. The applicants miss our instructions examples on how to produce the documentation despite listing the instructions right near the upload space. Is there a validation tool that can be used to help in this instance? I am imagining something like when the applicant clicks the upload button, a pop-up message appears with a reminder of the documentation instructions and asking the applicant to affirm they've read, understood instructions prior to continuing with the upload.
I don't know that you could build that directly into the upload field, but you can have a checkbox or some other type of confirmation that would make you, acknowledge that you have read the instructions and followed them. It might not be within that upload field, but it could be immediately before or immediately after, coupled with the instructions. So that would be one way to do that. If the upload instructions are something about the file type, then obviously we can restrict the file type. You can also restrict the file size and the number of files as well. So There are a number of validations that you can enable for upload fields. It just depends on the specific requirements and what those instructions are that people are not following. Hopefully that answers your question.
And another question.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay. Another question that was submitted. How do you make a text field yellow while the cursor is in it?
Is there a way to do that? I'm not entirely sure if there's a way to do that. It may be in the branding settings. There may be a way to change the color of the background of a field that you're in. That might be something that we can take a look at. So if you have questions about that directly, or if you want to contact me directly, we can, look at that. It might be just a simple setting in brandings or in branding.
Awesome. And another question submitted. I'm trying to understand the reason you would want to choose the appear as required versus required. When would you want to not require a field?
When would you want to not require a field? There might be some fields that are deemed optional. They might be just additional information that you can provide. So for example, on, let's say, a grantee report, you might have an extra field that says something like, is there anything else you would like to tell us? And that could be an optional field, so you wouldn't make it required or mandatory. The appear as mandatory can be used in conjunction with a smart check validation, let's say. So if you set the field to mandatory, it's going to make you put something in the field. But if you set it to appear as mandatory, it still looks like it's mandatory, but the smart check takes over. So it doesn't treat it like a mandatory field. It treats it like a field that has a different validation on it. The appear as mandatory just alerts the user that they're still going to have to put something in there, but it may not just be a matter of putting some data or some kind of data in there. It's a matter of validating the exact data that you put in there. But you would still want to mark it as mandatory so that they don't skip the question.
They said that it's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.
Are there any other questions? I do not see any in our Q&A section or the chat. So in the meantime, as we wait for possibly more questions, I wanted to remind you all that we will be sending out a short survey on how we did today. So please keep an eye out for that in the next few days. We always appreciate hearing your feedback. And I still don't think I see any more questions. Let me double check. All right, so if there are no more questions, thank you so much to all of our attendees for joining us today. I hope you can take away from this webinar some new ideas and recommendations for making your SmartSimple applications more complete and accurate. Please feel free to contact Jamie. Her email is on the screen if she hasn't addressed all your questions today, or if you have any more questions, or if you have any ideas for other webinar topics that you would like to see. Absolutely. And we hope that you have a great rest of your day. So Jamie, thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any closing remarks you'd like to leave to our audience today? Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all have a fantastic day, and we'll see you at the next webinar.